Hi, sweet ones. This is Grandma Kitty. Today I want to tell you about Stacy Robinson Hunsucker, a woman whose smile lit up every room. Her story is one you won't forget, and it carries lessons we should all hold close. For 32-year-old Stacy Hunsucker, home was Mount Holly, North Carolina. She had married her high school sweetheart, Joshua, and together they were raising their two little girls, Piper and Willow. Everyone who knew Stacy always said the same thing. She was a wonderful mother, a bright and happy person who filled every room with warmth. But behind the picture of a content family life, something dark was quietly taking shape. And on September 23rd of the year 2018, Stacy's life would be taken in a cold, calculated way that no one could have imagined. And before we start, would you do something for me? Go ahead and subscribe so you'll never miss a story. Think of it as Grandma saving you a little place right here, so every time I sit down to share, you'll be here with me. Stacy Robinson was born in Mecklenburg County, the daughter of John and Susie Robinson. She grew up alongside her two brothers, Eric and Paul, and her sister, Amy. After finishing her studies at East Gaston High School, Stacy went on to earn an associate's degree in paralegal sciences from Gaston College. She worked at two law firms, Ted Grieve and Associates and Reagan & Reagan. Later, she discovered her true passion was teaching. She took a job at the preschool at First Baptist Charlotte, then at First Methodist Preschool in Mount Holly, and later at the Stowe Young Men's Christian Association. Her friend Shell O'Day often said Stacy had a gift for creating things. She loved crafting, especially painting little wooden signs that she would sell. One summer day in 2018, O'Day stopped by Stacy's house to pick up a welcome sign she had bought for $50. It was years earlier, while working at a department store, that Stacy met Joshua Lee Hunsucker. He was 2 years older than her, and the very first thing he noticed was her striking height. Stacy stood at 5 feet 11 inches, and Joshua was 6 feet 5. He asked her out again and again, but Stacy kept turning him down. Joshua, however, was determined. He learned she played softball and showed up to her practice, even joining her team. Both of them were talented athletes with the skill to possibly go professional. Eventually, their friendship turned into romance. They married in the year 2010 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. The couple had been together since high school, and to everyone around them, they looked happy. Soon, they welcomed two daughters, Piper Elizabeth and Willow Darlene. Joshua built a career as a flight paramedic with Atrium Health's Med Center Air, a position he had held since 2013. He had once been a college football player, and he carried himself with confidence and charm. Stacy chose to be a full-time homemaker, devoting herself entirely to her daughters. On their nights out, Stacy and Joshua loved going to concerts or gathering at cookouts with friends. O'Day would describe them as a cute couple who never seemed to argue. Stacy was also deeply rooted in her community. She was a lifetime member of Mount Holly United Methodist Church, where she joined many groups and activities. She loved making crafts, taking trips to the beach, watching sports, and filling her phone with pictures of her daughters and herself. Yet, beneath this seemingly perfect life, trouble was building. In February of 2013, after giving birth to her first daughter, Piper, Stacy began experiencing strange health problems. The symptoms were vague but deeply concerning. Her health started to decline without explanation, leaving doctors searching desperately for answers. Only 5 months later, in July of 2013, disaster struck again. A fire ripped through their home, destroying nearly all of their belongings. The fire left Stacy and Joshua shaken, both emotionally and financially. Everything they had built together was gone. Friends rallied to help. Suzanne Steinbroner, one of their friends, set up a GoFundMe campaign to raise money. The campaign became more than just financial support. It became a running record of Stacy's ongoing mysterious medical struggles. But Stacy's health continued to worsen. In November of 2014, after giving birth to her second daughter, Willow, she was admitted to the hospital with dangerously low heart rate and blood pressure. She was placed in intensive care for several days while doctors ran countless tests, yet no one could find a cause. It seemed as if her body was under constant attack from an invisible force. Suzanne updated the GoFundMe page, explaining that the doctors were still stumped. Then, in January of 2015, Stacy was hospitalized again with another dangerously low heart rate. This time, her life was in grave danger. After being admitted, she suddenly went into cardiac arrest. Her heart stopped beating. She was placed on a ventilator as doctors fought to save her life. By February of that year, the medical team made a shocking decision. Stacy, who had not yet reached her 30th birthday, would need a pacemaker implanted. It was almost unthinkable for someone so young. A pacemaker was meant to regulate the electrical signals of her heart, but for someone with no family history of heart disease, this was alarming. At the time, no one could understand why this was happening. Later, investigators would discover the truth. All of her mysterious symptoms pointed to poisoning by tetrahydrozoline, a chemical found in eye drops that, when ingested, can severely disrupt the heart and blood pressure, sometimes fatally. The signs had been there all along. Sudden drops in her heart rate, episodes of low blood pressure, cardiac arrest that made no medical sense, a pacemaker implanted in a woman barely 30 years old. Joshua, with his training as a flight paramedic, knew exactly what he was doing. He knew how to give doses that would not kill instantly but would weaken her body over time. He knew tests would never reveal the poison. He knew doctors would blame her heart instead of suspecting foul play. For Stacy's mother, Susie, the unease never left. She often called her daughter the moment she had a bad dream or an uneasy feeling, just to make sure Stacy was okay. A mother's instinct, whispering that something was wrong even when she could not explain it. The constant emergencies had another consequence: enormous financial strain. The hospital stays, the surgeries, the specialists, all of it piled debt onto the family. The GoFundMe campaign helped, but the weight of the bills was crushing. All the while, Joshua was carefully building a narrative that would make Stacy's sudden death look inevitable, like a natural tragedy instead of murder. On the evening of September 23rd of 2018, Joshua dialed 911. He claimed to have found his 32-year-old wife unresponsive, slumped over the side of the couch, but when investigators spoke with him, his story kept changing. At the scene, he said he had stepped outside to lock the cars because of recent burglaries in the area. To one friend, he said he had been out walking to burn off energy. To another, he said he had been cutting wood for his crafts. And to his mother-in-law, Susie, he gave a completely different version, that he had been working at the kitchen table on his laptop with his back turned, only to notice Stacy slumped when he looked up. 4 different stories. The truth never changes. When paramedics arrived, they found Stacy with no pulse, her lips blue. She was rushed to the hospital, but there was nothing they could do. Stacy Robinson Hunsucker was pronounced dead. With her medical history, the doctors and police treated it as natural. Cardiac arrest. Her heart had simply given out. But Joshua's behavior afterward told a different story. He refused an autopsy, even though Stacy had registered as an organ donor. His insistence was unusual and suspicious. Within 2 days, her body was cremated. Families often wait weeks, but Joshua seemed in a rush to erase the evidence. In that same window of time, he filed claims on Stacy's life insurance policies, 2 separate policies, one worth $200,000 with a clause that could add another $100,000 and another worth $50,000. He was the only beneficiary. To everyone else, it looked like a tragedy. To Joshua, it was exactly the outcome he had been planning. The funeral arrangements spoke volumes on their own. Stacy's parents John and Susie Robinson were the ones who planned and paid for the funeral. Joshua, her husband, seemed strangely distant from the process. Instead of appearing as a grieving widower who had just lost the mother of his 2 daughters, he acted more like an outsider, someone just going through the motions. It was as if he was watching everything happen around him without truly feeling the loss of the woman he had been married to for 8 years. In the months following Stacy's death, Joshua hired a babysitter named Kaylin McDonald to care for Piper and Willow. What she observed during her time in their home was deeply unsettling. Later, she shared her experiences with Peter Van Sant on the television program CBS 48 Hours. Kaylin's testimony painted a chilling picture of a man who had lost his wife but showed none of the pain one would expect. She said Joshua never appeared sad, not once. She never saw him cry. He never spoke as if he missed Stacy. Instead, Joshua seemed full of joy. He was happy, but not because of his family. He was happy because of his new girlfriend, a colleague named Jennifer Elkins, known to everyone as Jen. Kaylin explained that Joshua and Jen were inseparable. They were constantly together, constantly affectionate, constantly planning their future as though Stacy had never existed. Joshua and Jen would talk openly about buying a brand new house, about starting a new life together. Importantly, it was not in the house where Stacy had lived and died. They wanted something fresh, as if Joshua was eager to erase the past entirely. Even more disturbing was the fact that Joshua never spoke about Stacy in front of his daughters. He did not tell them stories about their mother. He did not share memories of the woman who had raised them. He did not reassure them that she had loved them deeply. It was as though Stacy had been completely erased, written out of their lives. Kaylin found this impossible to understand. She reflected on her own father's death and explained how she could not stop talking about him after he passed, how she felt compelled to share memories, to keep him alive in spirit. Joshua did the opposite. He made Stacy vanish. Within 6 months of Stacy's death, Jen had moved into the home Joshua had once shared with his wife. She slept in the very bed where Stacy had once slept, surrounded by the life Stacy had built. To observers, it looked as though Jen had simply stepped into Stacy's role, replacing her completely. Joshua's colleagues at Atrium Health's Med Center Air had noticed the same troubling pattern. They told investigators that Joshua showed almost no grief after Stacy's death. Instead, he flaunted his new relationship. His colleagues were disturbed at how quickly Jen became part of his life and his household. The speed of it shocked them. They described Joshua as acting unaffected, as if the death of his wife had been nothing more than an inconvenience. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. And then came the money. After collecting $250,000 from Stacy's life insurance policies, Joshua began spending freely. He purchased a boat valued at somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000. A judge later expressed concern about this purchase, warning Joshua through his attorney that if he attempted to hide the boat, he would be sent straight back to jail. Joshua also began taking multiple expensive vacations with Jen. These were trips he could never have afforded while Stacy was alive, when the family was drowning in medical debt. Now, with insurance money in his hands, he was living lavishly, buying luxuries, traveling, and enjoying a life that had been impossible before. Joshua even paid off the mortgage on the Mount Holly family home. That house was around 1,516 square feet and valued at $215,380. Later, in a wrongful death lawsuit filed by Stacy's parents, every one of these purchases was detailed to show exactly how Joshua had spent the money. The lawsuit painted a picture of a man who seemed thrilled to be free of his wife, thrilled to have money, and thrilled to begin a new life with his mistress. For Susie Robinson, Stacy's mother, all of these actions were screaming red flags. She learned that Joshua had been seeing Jen before Stacy died. The affair had been ongoing, carried out behind Stacy's back even while Stacy was in and out of intensive care, fighting for her life. Susie also knew about the life insurance claims Joshua had filed within mere days of Stacy's death before the funeral had even been held. It was impossible to ignore the pattern. The insurance claims filed almost immediately. The refusal to allow an autopsy, the decision to cremate Stacy so quickly, the presence of a mistress already waiting in the wings, the years of mysterious medical problems that had never been explained, the boat, the trips, the complete lack of grief. To Susie, it was undeniable. Something was terribly wrong. In May of 2019, 9 months after her daughter's death, Susie took a step that changed everything. She contacted the North Carolina Department of Insurance and filed a fraud complaint against her son-in-law. She told them she believed Joshua had murdered Stacy for insurance money, and so he could freely be with his mistress without the inconvenience of a divorce. She could not have known that this simple act of following her instincts would open the door to a massive criminal investigation. Mike Causey, the North Carolina Insurance Commissioner, later explained that when the referral came from Susie, it went straight to the Criminal Investigations Division. The initial reports had listed Stacy's death as natural or heart attack. Nothing suspicious, case closed. But the insurance investigators did not stop there. They decided to dig deeper, to question every detail, and to pursue every lead. A strong team of investigators assembled quickly. It included experts from the North Carolina Department of Insurance Criminal Investigations Division, the Gaston County Police, and even the Department of Homeland Security. Special Agent Lisa Morgan was assigned to lead. As she reviewed the case, she uncovered a detail that proved critical. Because Stacy had registered as an organ donor, a small vial of her blood had been preserved by the LifeShare Donor Center before her cremation. This was routine procedure done to support the organ donation process. But in Stacy's case, it became the single piece of evidence Joshua had not destroyed, the one thing he had not accounted for, the one mistake that unraveled everything. That vial of blood was sent for toxicology testing. At first, the standard screenings revealed nothing unusual, no common poisons, no drugs, but the investigators pressed for more specialized tests, broader panels that looked beyond the routine. The results were shocking. The toxicology showed traces of tetrahydrozoline, the active ingredient in many common eye drops. But the levels in Stacy's blood were not normal. They were 30 to 40 times higher than what could be explained by accidental ingestion or standard use. These were not therapeutic levels. They were lethal levels, proof of deliberate and repeated poisoning. Forensic toxicologist Diane Garvin reviewed the findings with alarm. She explained that the results clearly pointed to poisoning. She compared it to a modern Mickey Finn slipping a chemical into a drink without the victim's knowledge. This was murder, carefully disguised as illness. Tetrahydrozoline is a decongestant normally used in over-the-counter eye drops or nasal sprays. Applied as directed to the eyes or nose, it is safe, but swallowed, it becomes highly dangerous. Its symptoms mimic natural heart problems and are not easily detected by ordinary toxicology tests. For someone like Stacy, whose heart was already compromised by a pacemaker, the poison was devastating. It attacked her weakest point, her heart, making her death appear like nothing more than another tragic cardiac event. Unless an investigator knew to test for tetrahydrozoline specifically, it would remain invisible. North Carolina State Attorney Jordan Green later told the court that this medicine can stop a heart or cause heart failure. He emphasized that Joshua Hunsucker, as a trained flight paramedic, would have known exactly how it worked. He had the knowledge, the access, and the opportunity. Court filings made it clear that his training gave him deep understanding of medications and their effects. His job also gave him access to non-controlled substances, the kind that were not logged or tracked. The investigation widened. Detectives interviewed Joshua's friends, family, and co-workers. What they learned was even more disturbing. Just weeks before Stacy's death, an eerily similar case had been making headlines nearby. Only 20 miles south, in South Carolina, a nurse named Lana Sue Clayton had been arrested on August 31st of 2018. She had confessed to poisoning her husband, Stephen Clayton, by slipping eye drops into his water over several days until he died. That case received extensive media coverage in the Charlotte region. Court documents later revealed that prosecutors saw multiple parallels between the Clayton case and Joshua's. Both perpetrators worked in the medical field. Both spouses died at home. Both deaths were first ruled natural. Both used tetrahydrozoline poisoning. Investigators believe that after hearing about the Clayton case, Joshua decided to use the same method on Stacy. There was one more chilling detail. Joshua's own colleagues recalled conversations with him before Stacy's death. On at least 2 occasions, he had told co-workers that if he ever killed someone, he would do it with Visine or another brand of eye drops. These were not jokes. These were serious comments from a man with medical training who knew exactly how the chemical would work. And then, only days after the Clayton case made headlines, Stacy Hunsucker was dead. This was not an accident. This was a premeditated, carefully calculated murder. On December 19th of the year 2019, Joshua Lee Hunsucker was arrested at his home in Mount Holly. He was charged with first-degree murder. Along with that, he faced charges of felony insurance fraud and obtaining property under false pretenses. Prosecutors said he had taken $250,000 in insurance benefits while allegedly knowing that his wife's death had been caused by his own actions. His bond was set at $1.5 million. On Christmas Eve, only 5 days after his arrest, Joshua managed to post that bond and was released. A temporary restraining order had been issued to stop him from using the insurance money, but somehow he found the funds anyway. That decision to release him would later prove catastrophic and deeply regrettable. Once out on bond, Joshua's behavior became more disturbing by the day. District Attorney Travis Page later said that the defendant's actions grew increasingly dangerous, and sadly, he was proven right. Joshua launched a campaign of harassment against Stacy's parents, John and Susie Robinson. He would stalk them, taking photographs and recording videos of them at their granddaughter's sports events. He mailed packages to their home, demanding they abandon the murder case. He followed them in his vehicle, drove past their home repeatedly, and even made vulgar gestures at them in the parking lot of their church. This intimidation campaign was relentless. It was clear that Joshua wanted to terrify them into silence. On February 4th of 2023, Joshua staged a bizarre and desperate stunt. He claimed he had been kidnapped. He filed a police report saying that he had pulled over to fix a flat tire when he was pistol whipped multiple times in the head. He said his hands had been zip-tied and that he had been injected with some unknown substance. Then, in a shocking accusation, he named John Robinson, Stacy's father, as the attacker. Mount Holly police carried out a thorough investigation. They found no evidence at all to support Joshua's claims. Every detail of his story fell apart under scrutiny. Investigators concluded he had made up the entire incident in an attempt to frame his father-in-law, trying to shift blame for Stacy's death onto her grieving family. But even after this failed scheme, Joshua went further. Only weeks later, in February of 2023, he poisoned his own 11-year-old daughter. She became gravely ill and had to be hospitalized. Tests revealed the same chemical in her system, tetrahydrozoline, the ingredient found in eye drops that had been linked to Stacy's death. In addition, doctors discovered an antidepressant in her body, a drug not approved for use in children, and that same drug was found in Joshua's truck. While she was being treated, Joshua told medical staff that it looked as though she had been given eye drops. Doctors noted that this explanation did not fit her symptoms at all. Prosecutors later argued that Joshua had poisoned his daughter in an attempt to frame the Robinsons yet again, hoping to paint them as dangerous and unfit to be around his children. In July of 2024, a judge ruled that Joshua had abused his daughter and neglected both children. He was arrested again in August of that same year, this time for witness intimidation. In November of 2024, his bond was revoked, and he has remained behind bars ever since. The pattern of his behavior was clear, it was cruel, it was monstrous, and it showed just how far Joshua was willing to go to avoid being held responsible. There was another incident that investigators later tied to his unraveling. On November 26th of the year 2019, just a few weeks before he was arrested for murder, Joshua had allegedly set fire to medical equipment on board an Atrium Health helicopter during a flight over Charlotte. At 12:59 in the morning, he set a syringe pump on fire while the helicopter was still in the air. The crew was forced to make an emergency landing at a car dealership along Independence Boulevard. Thankfully, no one was injured, but the danger was immense. Joshua was charged with felony arson for that act. The timing of the arson was considered very important. It had happened less than 1 month before his arrest for murder. Investigators believe Joshua already suspected that police were closing in on him, and the fire was part of a reckless attempt to create chaos. Atrium Health released a statement expressing shock. They said it was impossible to understand what could have possessed him to endanger lives in such a way. At the time, Joshua had already been placed on administrative leave for misconduct at work. The day after his December arrest, Atrium Health terminated his employment at Med Center Air, where he had worked since 2013. Joshua's trial was first scheduled for March of 2025, but prosecutors said that because of all the new developments, it would likely be delayed until the autumn of that year. After his initial arrest, Stacy's family spoke through their attorney. They released a statement full of pain and determination. They said, "We will not rest until justice is served. We will do everything in our power to support and care for your beautiful daughters, Piper and Willow." Kelly, one of Stacy's friends from high school, shared her own grief. She said Stacy had not deserved any of this. She described Stacy as a wonderful mother and a truly happy person. In April of the year 2020, Susie Robinson, Stacy's mother, wrote a heartbreaking message. "Oh, my sweet, funny, lovable, smiling Stacy, you are missing so many milestones. It makes me so sad. You are not here to celebrate your pumpkin's birthday. I gave both of your girls an extra hug, especially for you today." This entire case highlighted the vital importance of insurance fraud investigations in uncovering homicides. North Carolina Insurance Commissioner Mike Causey said, "Who would ever guess that an insurance fraud investigation could lead to a full-blown murder investigation?" Without Susie Robinson's intuition as a mother, and without that preserved blood sample from organ donation, Joshua would have gotten away with the perfect crime. Stacy Robinson Hunsucker's legacy is clear. She was a devoted mother, a loving teacher, and an active member of her church. She enjoyed crafting, taking beach trips, watching sports, and capturing memories and pictures with her daughters. Her smile was described as radiant, something that brought comfort to all who knew her. As of November of the year 2024, Joshua remains locked up in Gaston County Jail without bond. Piper and Willa, now around 12 and 14 years old, have been removed from his care. Their grandparents, John and Susie Robinson, continue to fight for full custody. While the final judgment of justice has not yet arrived, one truth is undeniable. Stacy Robinson Hunsucker will never be forgotten.